Good evening and welcome. My name is Karen Marcinke. I'm Program Manager with the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Safely Home, Reducing the Risk of Wandering, our evening of education. And my slides, there we go. So tonight, this evening, we hope you learn about risk levels and strategies to reduce the risk of getting lost, behaviors involved in wandering, how wandering can lead to getting lost, and how to prepare a multi-step safety plan. We want to thank our sponsors. The Evening of Education is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, SGI, and proudly supported by SaskTel Telcare. Before we begin, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping items. We will be recording tonight's session and it will be available online at a later date. None of the attendees' names will be shown as part of the meeting, of the recording. So along with your Zoom link for tonight's session, you should have received a copy of the presentation, a multi-step safety plan checklist, and the guide. There are many great resources available on our website as well. The three presentations tonight will be about an hour to an hour and a half, followed by a question period. Please type your questions for Dr. Neubauer or Heather Starkenburg into the button near the bottom of your screen marked Q&A. So the Q&A button, not the chat. So the Q&A one is the only way we will be taking questions this evening. We will have moderators who will read, summarize, and present the questions to Dr. Neubauer and Heather at the end of the presentations. We would ask that you keep your questions relevant to the topic being presented tonight. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Society staff at one of the 7 resource centers across the province or by calling the Dementia Helpline. Prior to the presentations, I'm going to provide you with a quick overview of who we are and what we do at the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Our mission, the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, empowers all people to live well with dementia while funding research into prevention, cures, and quality of life. It's a board-directed charity incorporated in 1982. A person does not need a formal diagnosis to be connected to us. We support those affected by Alzheimer's disease and other dementias and have resources and knowledge about many types of dementia. Our core services are support, education and awareness, advocacy, and research. It's important to note that whether you call our dementia helpline or are directly referred to us by a healthcare provider, you will receive the same services. Currently, all our programs are provided virtually and at no cost during the pandemic. I'd like to give an overview of what happens when a client is referred to the Alzheimer Society. So what can clients expect from the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan? Individualized connection and service, individual information and support available for both the person with dementia and the care partner. We work with each individual client and learn their stories and provide the right information, support, strategies for each person's situation. Learning opportunities. We offer a number of learning series courses to help people with dementia, their families and friends to live as well as possible with dementia. The courses offered build upon each other, covering the continuum of the disease. We also hold evenings of education like tonight throughout the year. They are on standalone topics presented by content experts. Connections, things like support groups. Alzheimer Society support groups offer a chance to exchange information with others living with and affected by dementia, access the most current information, learn and share practical tips for coping with change, decrease feelings of loneliness and isolation, express feelings and be reassured that these feelings are normal, and find a sense of hope. Minds in Motion, it's a 2-hour weekly program that combines physical activity and social activity for those with early stage dementia and a friend, family member, or caregiver. connection to other organizations. This includes providing information on available services provided by the Saskatchewan Health Authority, other government agencies, and lists of private or community-based organizations that help support people's dementia journey. I would now like to introduce tonight's first guest speaker, Dr. Noelannah Neubauer. Dr. Noelannah Neubauer is a postdoctoral fellow in the Faculty of Health at the University of Waterloo under the supervision of Dr. Lily Liu. She's also a second-year occupational therapy student at the University of Alberta. Dr. Neubauer's developing research program focuses on the creation and implementation of policies and strategies to enable older adults to age in place. More recently, her research has focused on devising and advocating for solutions that balance risk and autonomy for persons with dementia that are at risk of getting lost and going missing. She's the co-founder of the International Consortium on Dementia and Wayfinding and co-chair of the Rapid Response Working Group through the Alzheimer Society of Ontario. And now I'd like to give a warm welcome to Dr. Neubauer.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I'm going to share my screen here. And there we go. So thank you so much, everyone, for having me. It's an absolute honor to be a part of this evening. So before I dive into the content, just to give you a little bit more information about myself and my team. So as what was mentioned in my bio, so while I am employed through the University of Waterloo, I presently reside in Edmonton. So I'm a prairie girl, and where I'm finishing occupational therapy school. So the research program that I have been associated with for a number of years is through the Aging and Innovation Research Program. My journey in this work started in 2015, where I did my PhD at the U of A through Lily Liu. And then she happened to change jobs and became the Dean of the Faculty of Health at the University of Waterloo, which has been a wonderful journey since she moved there 2 years ago. In addition to Lily, we also have a number of research members that it's always an honor to be able to work with them, because truly I'm only as successful as the team that I'm associated with. So we have Dr. Antonio Mingwell Cruz. He is an engineer. We also have Dr. Christine Dom, who's a research assistant professor, and she's an OT herself. And then we also have another postdoc, Hector Perez. And our program, it started off with myself and Lily, and now we have more than 6 different undergrads. We have master's students, PhD students. So it's been amazing to see the growth of this team. And before I even get even further on in terms of the other information that I'll be sharing with you all today, just to share with you the values and beliefs about the research that my team is involved with. So when you think about a researcher, you think of us as sitting in our ivory towers and dictating where things go. Our team does not work that way. We very much, when we end up coming through things, is we don't come up with the questions. We actually work very closely with Alzheimer societies, community organizations, care partners, and those that live with dementia, because truly all of you have the expertise, and we're the ones that just see a problem that comes up to us and we work together to try to figure it out. So we try to involve many different types of stakeholders in the work that we do, because we're aware that there's many different solutions that we need to come in. And as I'll describe throughout this presentation, when we think about lost persons with dementia, we always think, oh, we'll use a GPS device. But hopefully what you'll learn from this presentation is that it's a lot more than just GPS devices. It's a very complicated issue, to the point that we have more than 8 different projects that is trying to find different angles to try to keep people living with dementia safe. And so, of course, the main topic of discussion for today is on this topic of wandering, or people with dementia that get lost and go missing. So I always like to use this slide, and I actually change it for every presentation that I give. And all I do is, all you have to do is simply Google lost person with dementia or lost older adult, and you'll come across numerous news articles, such as the ones you see on this slide. So all the ones on this slide are either missing incidences that have happened over the last year or 2 in Alberta, or you're probably going to recognize there's some cases that have happened in Saskatchewan. And so the number of missing cases involving this population has only grown with, of course, an aging population. And in some cases, yes, we do have happy endings where the person is found safely and everything is good. But unfortunately, there are those cases where the outcome isn't so happy. So in the case of Shin No, so his son, Sam, his father went missing back in 2013 out of Coquitlam, BC. It was the first time he ever got lost, but unfortunately, it was the last time he was ever found. And they've yet to find Shin No's remains. And then more recently, in my neck of the woods in Edmonton, there was a case where Carol Burns, she went missing in November, and it was only last month they found her remains in Edmonton. So again, it's these harrowing stories that are changing the lives of communities. And really for myself as a researcher and from many different stakeholders is how can we prevent these cases from happening to begin with? How can we let people be safe and let them live the lives that they want to live? So what are the trends? So what I was already starting to gear towards is that unfortunately, when we're dealing with an aging population, what we had predicted, and we were able to see this through a publication that actually just published about a week ago, is that we're seeing an increase in the number of missing cases involving those living with dementia. So in a study that I recently did through the Alzheimer Society of Ontario, I interviewed a series of police from across the province. And I just wanted to know just how many people are actually getting lost and going missing involving this population on a regular basis. And essentially what you can see on this little table here is that at one point they were only dealing with about 5% of their cases with someone with dementia. And now it's estimated that between 30 to 50% of the calls that they're dealing with in Ontario is involving this population. So again, that really aids in terms of the alarm bells that we're hearing that this is becoming an issue. And it's at the point now that police don't know what to do anymore. And then when you look at the frequency, so even talking to Toronto Police Service themselves, they said that they get between 5 to 7 calls a day of someone with dementia or an older adult that's been reported missing. That's incredible, and it's unfortunate that it's happening. But again, that just aids to the urgency in terms of what our team is doing and how can we keep this population safe. And so then the next question is, great, we know how many people are getting lost or approximately how many, but where are these reports coming from? Where are people going missing? Typically, we would assume that a person with dementia gets lost when they live in their communities. But in a publication that was done in 2015 by Bantry White and Montgomery, what they had found was that only about 60% of the cases of reported missing people with dementia is actually from the community. And it's 30% of the cases that actually come from care homes and hospitals. So we always assume that locked dementia units, long-term care facilities are safe. But when I've been speaking to police, in many cases, people are able to get out. It's not as safe as what you think. And so really, how do we come up with other strategies other than putting someone in a locked dementia unit that allows them to stay safe and have that degree of autonomy? And then of course, in this report as well, about 12% came from just being out in the community, being out shopping with their loved one, they got lost, and then that was a missing persons case. And so I know this might be a little bit more harrowing than I'll show you, but again, it's just these things to think of. So locations in which people with dementia are typically found alive. It's not surprising that cities, it tends to be easier to find them because, well, you're more visible. If you're out in a community, there's lots of people that are around you, so you're able to find them in residential yards and in streets, and that's where the happy stories are. But unfortunately, the unhappy stories, the unfortunate outcomes really come from the rural communities. And that really speaks to especially Saskatchewan because you are very much a rural province. And so unfortunately, most of the cases where people are unfortunately found deceased is we're finding them in places like natural areas like brushes and like ditches or in wooded areas. Or from what the research has been saying is that people with dementia, when they're further on in their journey, they become attracted to water. And so we tend to find them in places like that. Or even they have the concept that they go until they get stuck. So sometimes you'll find them in places that other missing populations don't go to, like being inside a hedge. So that just adds to the complexity again of just trying to find these individuals before something bad happens to them. And so the concept of wandering, I know that lots of people use it, but something that I always like to highlight as well in my presentation is that we tend to assume that wandering is aimless. We always think, oh, a wanderer is someone in those long-term care facilities that pace back and forth. But from our team and what around the world, they're starting to change this lens in terms of what wandering is. It's a lot more than just an aimless behavior. Wandering myself, I can go for a wander in the woods and that's wandering for me. And people sometimes though, when I go out, sometimes people with dementia aren't always aware that they're lost. And again, that adds to the complexity because they don't think they're lost, but their whole family has spent hours trying to search for them. So they're not going to reach out for help if they don't think that they're lost. And unfortunately, when traditionally, when we looked at dealing with wandering behavior, we always used locked doors. But with the movement that the dementia community has, and I work very closely with quite a few of them, is that there's a push for getting away from these locked doors because it reduces a person's ability to remain engaged in their communities. And so we really want to be able to push to let them live the lives they live. But then the big question that again has turned into our research program is how do we keep them safe at the same time? So rather than asking the question, what are the risks of wandering? The questions that I always like to turn to people is, what are the risks of restricting it? Wandering can be very important to people. And I'm sure many of us have even felt this with the pandemic. Imagine being stuck in your apartment for 2 weeks and not being able to go outside. Well, that is an everyday life for someone that is in a long-term care facility, unfortunately. And unfortunately, when we're stuck in one place, we lose the ability of being able to be out in our communities, the smells and the sounds that come from being out in the woods and in nature. Some people, further along on their journey, they use wandering to express that a need isn't being met. Let's say I'm hungry and I don't remember how to say that. Well, I might follow my care partner just so I can try to highlight, so I'm hungry. Can you guide me to where the food is? Getting to be with people, making decisions, autonomy, and even just being able to be out and about, like going to a coffee shop. All those things are taken away if we restrict the person's ability to wander. So this is the Goldilocks principle. This is something that I came up with during my PhD. And so really this just shows a continuum that again, is going to help you understand strategies. So traditionally, we're very much a reactive people. We always like to wait until something happens. Oh, it's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to get lost. But then the problem is all of a sudden, let's say the person with dementia does get lost. Well, all of a sudden the alarm bells go off crazy. And then all of a sudden we're thinking we have to do everything in our power to keep the person safe. Well, if we're reactionary like that, unfortunately, yes, the person's safe, but then their independence goes out the window. But then the other way can be around where the person has all the independence in the world. But if the first time they ever get lost, it might be the last time they're ever found. So again, that's not safe. So something that we really want to focus on when we're talking about strategies is how can we be in that optimal risk where we understand that any person with dementia is at risk. You might think that they're not, but any person, one moment you know where you are, the next minute you can go out even into your hallway or outside, and you're gonna have no idea where you are. It can happen very quickly. So how can we understand we're at risk, but then integrate strategies so we can still have that sense of independence and autonomy? This is really where the field is starting to shift since the 90s. And so as what I'm trying to allude to is, again, it's more than just a GPS device. So the way that our team has seen things is that there's about 4 different prongs for how do we approach people with dementia that get lost and preventing them from getting lost to begin with. So obviously locator devices are a piece of it. They do help. But the problem is what happens when they don't work, or what happens if I'm not wearing it? So then that's where things like dementia friendly communities can come into play, and that I'll describe, like different community alert systems, or even risk reduction strategies, just having a simple guideline and knowing what strategies exist. And then the biggest piece, which it's, and again, you guys are honored to have such an amazing Alzheimer Society, where the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan and other Alzheimer societies, awareness and education, just knowing you're at risk of getting lost, that will take you a long way before strategies are in place. As long as you know you're at risk, then that means you might be starting to make different steps to keep yourself safe. So of course, I'll start with GPS just so, because I know everyone probably has that burning question about what type of GPS devices are out there. So the first one that I'm going to highlight, so there's 3 different types that we tend to have. So for locating devices, the biggest one is GPS devices. And the best way I like to describe it is it's almost like X marks the spot. If I have my phone and someone is wearing the GPS device, it shows the map and it shows exactly where they are. Typically, though, it's not precise. Some cases it's off by a meter. And again, it can complicate things because imagine you're in a mall. A meter can mean quite a lot. It can mean they're in the store or they're in another store. So again, you always have to keep that in mind. The other type is Bluetooth. So Bluetooth is one where we use Wi-Fi. So again, it doesn't have some limitations like GPS. GPS is awful when we're in these big concrete buildings. But Bluetooth isn't too bad. You're dealing with Wi-Fi, but the problem is when you step outside and there's no Wi-Fi, then it doesn't really work. The other one that people are less aware of is called RFID. And essentially it's a World War II technology. It's old, but it can be effective, especially in rural communities. And the best way of being able to describe it is it's not like X marks the spot on a map. It operates differently, where it's more like the game. I'm sure most of us know what it is. I know the up and coming generation doesn't, but the game of Marco Polo. So if you end up saying Marco, and the closer you get, then you're going to be able to hear the person. You know that the signal is getting stronger, so you know you're getting closer. That's essentially how this device works. And many police organizations, I know in Ontario, and it is in other provinces as well, where they cover it. And then essentially if the person gets lost and goes missing, and they're wearing just a little RFID tag, then the police can use that to be able to find the person sooner. But then something that most people don't talk about is when we look at the commercial locating devices, these are the ones that cost money. So Safe Tracks is an example. There's many other Canadian-based companies where you have to purchase the device outright, and it comes in different forms. So you can have it in the form of a watch, you can have it in a lanyard, you can even have it as a smart sole, so you can slip it into someone's shoes. Of course, you have to make sure that they're charged. But with these devices, not only do you have to purchase the device itself, but in many cases, with at least these commercial ones, you have to go through a company. You do have to pay a monthly fee. And I know that it's something that people always need to be aware of. It can range as cheap as $5 a month, or it can be even as much as $30 a month. But it's something for people to keep in mind. But then another piece is the phone locating devices. So we always assume that watches and these fancy ones that I have to buy are the only things that are available, but there's a lot more than that. So our phones, most of us are starting to get smartphones, and smartphones already have a GPS embedded in it. And the cool thing is that we already have apps. So if you're an iPhone user, the Find My Friends feature, I know many people with dementia that actually use it themselves. And it's handy because it's free. As long as you have the phone on you, you can keep a lookout for your loved one. Another one that I know many people with dementia use themselves, as well as their care partners, is an app called Life 360. Again, it's a free app that you can use, and you can see where the person is, and you're able to actually set something called a geofence. So let's say I go outside my apartment, then a little alarm might go off and it'll notify my care partner that I left. So it has a bunch of different handy features. So not only are you able to find them, but you're also able to know when they're on the move and they're going somewhere where maybe they didn't tell you that they were going somewhere. And then for the Bluetooth, these ones are a little bit cheaper, and they're ones that are simply, you can go on Amazon and look them up. So I know Tile is quite popular, where they're ones that you can put onto a keychain. They're turning into stickers. The one that you see for Safe Tracks are ones that some long-term care facilities and assisted living facilities use. And again, someone has to still wear something, it's that little chip, and essentially it's able to figure out where they are. But again, these are cheaper options that people can have. But keeping in mind, once you're away from Wi-Fi, it doesn't work anymore. So because it doesn't have GPS in it. And then that RFID, this is essentially what it looks like. It's not as pretty looking. I know that sometimes these devices can be quite stigmatizing, but essentially what you see here, that's what the person with dementia should be wearing. And then the police will have that device, that Marco Polo device, to be able to find that signal and be able to find them. So some key elements of locating devices. So these are some things that we've learned from our team over the years in terms of what are some questions or things that you as a consumer should think of before you buy a device if it's of interest to you. Cost. We know that cost is very important. We're spending enough money on all these other things, let alone purchasing a device. Contracts and warranties. Again, it's something that the website might not talk about, but sometimes they might have those. So you have to be aware. You might have to be paying it for upwards to 2 years. You always have to look at the fine print. Product size and weight, it can be super tiny or it could be super bulky. There's lots of different ways of being able to find these different types of devices. How the device is worn, as I showed you, there's multiple ways of being able to wear it. It's just all based on what you're looking for. Durability, I know that these devices are getting a little bit better because we want them to be water resistant. We want them to be drop proof. We don't want something that's going to break right away if it's pretty much someone's lifeline. And then as well as communications and range and accuracy. And then some other pieces, battery and charging. Again, who wants to charge something all the time? So you have to make sure you know how long the charge is good for. Alarms, sometimes they have things where if they take it off, it has an alarm that goes off, or a water alarm. Where does it work? Again, hopefully from what I presented in a couple other slides, you really need to keep in mind, is it a GPS? Is it RFID? Is it a Bluetooth? Because again, that's going to have implications in terms of how far can the person get out with it actually working. Ease of use, customer care, and then required equipment. These are all pieces to think of when you're purchasing a device, because if you miss something, it might not be the device you're looking for. So we really want to make sure you want to address all of them. And so to be able to make everyone's lives easier, this is a study that is currently in the works. Right now, there's only the devices that are out there, but we don't know just how easy to use these devices are. And so over the last year, we started a project where we're actually trying to develop a usability tool where essentially for yourself, you can use the device and then answer some of these questions. And then based on your responses, you can share it with others. So you can get a better sense in terms of what device is working better for others. So this is a project that is currently in the works. And then to be able to simplify all those things, I know that I gave you 2 slides, lots of things to think of in terms of looking at a device. This website has been amazing. So I was a part of it in its development in 2018 through the Finding Your Way program with the Alzheimer Society of Ontario. I know that the website is currently down because we're making some changes, but when it does come live, hopefully in the next couple of months, it's quite simple because instead of you having to Google and look through all these different websites, the intention of this is that we encourage different companies from across Canada to upload their product. And then you yourself can hit the compare feature. And then all those different things that I spoke of, like battery life, like durability, it actually makes companies mention what they are. So then you can compare these devices side by side and help make a decision. So I know that this website has been quite popular since it was launched in 2018. And again, it's just to help you be able to make a better decision rather than having to spend hours searching for it. But then again, keeping in mind that GPS devices aren't the only thing we need to focus on. So there's many other cheaper, lower tech strategies that we can think of. So in a literature review that I published in 2018, and again, this highlights that there's a lot of strategies out there. From exercising is a way of being able to reduce or be able to help you find your way, using the community identification, like putting a label on your watch or putting a label in your clothing. There's other ways of being able to do it that's cheaper that can help keep someone safe. And I'll highlight those in this slide. So this is the Canadian guideline for safe wandering. It was essentially the essence of my PhD for 4 years, where really the whole purpose of it was to take all these different strategies. There's more than 300 strategies for this topic, which was surprising when I initially did the study. And I was able to make an easy to use guideline. So essentially what you can see here is you have low risk, medium, high risk, and unplanned absence, which from the stakeholders I worked with is like the nicer way of saying the person's missing. And then underneath that highlights a check mark box in terms of what would put that person at that particular risk level. And then underneath that is the indicated strategies. And so this was just an easy way of being able to simplify it all. There's 3 different versions. So there's one for people that live with dementia, because all of those that I involved over the years, they said that they wanted to be active agents in their own care. So they have their own guideline that they could follow. But there's also one for care partners or community settings. And then there's also one for care facilities. And so this guideline was launched when I finished my PhD in 2019. And it's now starting to be used by different organizations from across the country, which is super exciting because again, it just highlights there's lots of strategies out there. Pick one that works best for you. Even better yet, pick a couple in case one fails and you have one by your side to come into play. And so since its initial launch, it was only a 2-page copy, but now I'm really happy to say, and again, this is very new. We've only been working on this for the last couple months, and as of a week ago, it's in its first prototype, was I took that guideline and now it's being turned into an interactive guideline. So it'll be a website where all you have to do is go in and ask a couple questions or answer a couple questions. It'll link you to what risk level you're at, and then it'll suggest different strategies. And so we're in the process of getting ready to start bringing in participants, hopefully in the next couple months, to give us feedback. So stay tuned for that because we'll always be looking for people. We always love to get feedback to make things better. And then another key piece that our team has been working on is when a GPS device fails or if the person has nothing on them, what do we do next? Well, one of the big questions that we've been getting, and I'm sure many have seen it on the news, is everyone's asking, why can't we use an Amber Alert but for missing seniors? Or what they use in the United States is called a Silver Alert. So while it might seem like a simple solution that we send off alert bells to everyone in the province to say, hey, someone's missing, keep a lookout for them. I want you to go back to one of the very first slides that I showed in terms of how many people with dementia go missing. So that case with Toronto where they get 5 to 7 calls a day, in an Amber Alert, it doesn't happen very often. And I know even some of my own family members, they get upset when the alarms go off because sometimes it happens in the middle of the night and it scares the crap out of us. But now imagine if that alarm bell goes off 5 to 7 times a day like Toronto gets for those calls. We would go crazy getting that many number of calls and alerts to the point that we would just start ignoring them. And so it's very challenging when we're trying to deal with this in Canada. So our team a couple years ago tried to develop our own prototype called Community ASAP. We're hoping that eventually someone will pick it up and turn it into a startup company to use. But essentially the way that it works is rather than pushing it to an entire province that this person with dementia has gone missing, is community based. So people can simply sign up, say that I only want to get an alert if they're 1 kilometer from me, if they're 5 kilometers from me, I get to choose that radius. And then I only get an alert if someone's gone missing then. And so that went through about a 2-year study, and it was quite successful. And it's a model that we're hoping eventually someone will be able to pick up. But in the meantime, it still hasn't stopped the conversations that have been going on this topic. So in addition to the development of strategies, our team has also started to get involved in policy. So I know my journey in that started in 2018 when the Alberta legislature was trying to pass a bill called Bill 210, the Amendment to the Missing Persons Act. So Alberta wanted to start to develop their own alert system. So it's fortunate that my supervisor, Lily Liu, and I were able to give recommendations in terms of what the alert system looked like. But then things went silent in Alberta, and again, other provinces were talking. And so in November of last year, we had the fortunate opportunity to run our own online national forum where we brought in people that live with dementia, care partners, Alzheimer societies, politicians, police, to just talk about this issue and figure out what we could do from the context of Canada. And so since that national forum online in November, we're now starting to have conversations with provinces from across the country in terms of what can we do, because really we know we need an alert system. We just need to figure out what is the best for us. And then another key piece that our team has been up to is education. So I've been fortunate that I've been working with the Alzheimer Society of Ontario, even as an Albertan. I've been working with them since 2018 as part of their Finding a Way program. And one piece that just started a couple years ago is the Rapid Response Working Group. So I know that for all of you in attendance, it might not necessarily apply to you, but just so you know, in the back end, police, unfortunately, we expect them to be social workers and we expect them to be law enforcement officers. But unfortunately, when they're going through police college, a lot of them don't learn about how to approach someone with dementia or how to deal with a missing person dementia case. And so this working group started in Ontario in 2018, where we started to develop education materials, just simply highlighting to police, this is how you talk to someone with dementia. These are the different approaches that you need to do. And so with that working group, we were able to develop a resource. We were able to launch it. And now we're just in the process of trying to evaluate it. And with the intentions, we're hoping that eventually we'll be able to push it across the country. And so this working group, from what you can see in this picture, again, we always like to have different types of stakeholders. So I have myself as the researcher. In this picture, we also have someone that lives with dementia, Paul Lee. We have a gentleman that was a care partner to his father with Alzheimer's disease for 10 years. We have Alzheimer societies, we had medical alert there, and we had police officers, but of course not in their uniforms, so you can't tell who's who. But this working group has been together for the last couple of years, and I know that I'm sure that you'll all be able to hear about the work of this group soon, because there is so much potential for educating not only our police, but also starting to move to educating our firefighters, because sometimes they're the ones that come to the door, and even our paramedics, their education is limited. So we're starting to develop resources for them. And then another piece as well is that what's going on in Saskatchewan and Alberta and Canada, well, missing incidences are happening around the world. So something that I had started during my PhD is I wanted to just unite the voices. We're always better united, I find. So I co-founded a group called the International Consortium on Dementia and Wayfinding. So again, we involve all different types of stakeholders, from those that live with dementia to clinicians to first responders to Alzheimer societies. And we have about 10 countries that are currently involved. We have more than 100 members. It started pre-pandemic, so we were able to go on fun road trips when we started. So we started things off in Calgary. I felt bad because we had some people in the United Kingdom that came out, and it was when Calgary was -40. So they got a little bit of taste of Alberta winters. But after that, a month later, we decided to fly to Edinburgh to run our own little meeting. We did another one in Liverpool. And then after that, the pandemic hit and we're 100% online now. But we are starting to develop different education materials and doing webinar series. So last summer we did a 7-week one where we had someone with dementia talk for an hour, and then we brought in researchers, again, just bringing all those different perspectives because we could all learn from each other. And the hope is that we're going to be able to launch our website in the next month or so. We have the one that I posted here. It's going to be updated and better. And then we'll also have a webinar series that we're hoping to aim for this summer. So again, if anyone is ever interested in it, stay tuned. So really what did we learn as I start to conclude all this information that I'm sure you're going to want to go back after because it's so much. So just understanding that there's many different realities, we need many different approaches. It's more than just using a GPS device. I can't emphasize that enough. Have more strategies in place. And then just appreciating that there's many different types of experts on this issue. Again, while researchers are a part of it, people with lived experience, you guys are just as much of an expert as we are, and we do better working together to be able to help find different solutions for this issue. Leveraging international experiences is always important. Some of the key lessons that we have learned here in Canada is because we've been speaking to those in the United Kingdom and the United States, and we're really starting to learn from each other. So I'm hoping that there'll be more acceleration in terms of strategies as we start talking more. And then again, researchers aren't scary. We like to have partnerships. We like to just help find solutions and work together. And so that's really where the world of research is starting to go. So ways for you to get involved. So our team is super approachable. We love what we do. If anyone is interested in some of the work, if this concept and this topic is of interest to you, feel free to sign up for one of our studies. In fact, there's one that we're in the process of recruiting as we speak. So that little scale that highlights the usability of GPS devices, we're looking for people to be able to fill out a questionnaire and simply look at items that you think work in this tool or don't work in this tool. So you can feel free to contact me if you're interested. It's a 20-minute questionnaire. It's quite easy. You can feel free to join in a community advisory committee. So again, we have advisors that live with dementia or care partners, and they help make sure that we're on the right track. So that's, if you want to be more involved, you can do that. And then of course, you can always join the International Consortium on Dementia and Wayfinding. You can be as involved as being a part of an advisory committee, or you can be as less involved by just simply getting emails and knowing when things are going on. So this is my contact information. I know that the slides have been shared, and I always love to hear perspectives, questions, anything like that. So feel free to contact me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neubauer, for your presentation. There will be information on the study sent after the presentation, so you can find out more that way. Next, we will watch an interview between Susan and Connie. Susan's a community member who will share her personal story of lived experience through conversation with Connie Snyder, a First Link coordinator with the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan.
I'm going to share a little bit about the journey that she's been on as a support person for her aunt and for her father and a deceased uncle as well. So Susan's certainly been on the journey for a while and comes to this evening with lots of lived experience. So thank you so much, Susan, for taking time to share a bit of your story with our audience here tonight. So just to set the stage a little bit, can you tell me a bit about your dad's journey with dementia and what it looked like prior to this past February?
Okay. Last summer, well, he's never been officially diagnosed with dementia. He's never been through GEM. His older brother went through GEM and lost his license. So Dad is very wary of going through GEM. And Bev's kind of, his wife is waffling on that. She's undecided as to whether they should do that or not. Anyway, so last summer he was, well, his style is to tell a lot of the same story in a loop, kind of. Last summer he forgot who Bev was for a bit. So he's kind of in a rough, I thought he was kind of in a rough spot. He got better as the summer went on. A crew came to their house and that gave him some entertainment. Of course, this is all during COVID, right? So they're isolated. So there's not too much social interaction. They're moving. They moved last fall. So the whole rigmarole and confusion around cleaning out the place, cleaning up the garage, getting rid of stuff that they've had. They were there for 29 years. Big place out in the middle of nowhere. So a lot of work to downsize it. And they moved to Martinsville in October, November. It's a 3-week move. They did it themselves with a utility trailer.
Wow.
And one van load or big truckload from the moving company. So for 3 weeks, they're running back and forth between acreage and Martinsville, hauling stuff. And at first I just helped them with the Martinsville end, and then I started helping them with at both ends, as did my sister and my brother on occasion. So then they got into Martensville, and I thought, okay, that was very confusing, upsetting for him. They didn't eat well. They didn't sleep well. A lot of stress. They had 2 houses for 3 weeks. I figured something was going to go wrong then, but nothing happened. So I was like, oh, whew, good. Yeah, we're through that. And he liked the new house. It was small. It's near a path. He can go for walks. They can go for walks. So he was settling in. I had a hard time finding it, and as did he, finding the actual house, because they all kind of looked the same to me. But he was settling in very nicely. So I relaxed. And
so
then
other than that loop, Susan, of telling stories, what are some of the other symptoms that he's shown?
Well, he'll stay on the same topic and just tell you about the same thing all the time. So I learned a lot about the Honda Fit continuous variable transmission. And so he's just, for whatever reason, he gets onto something and he sticks with that. For a while there, he was giving me an inventory of all the appliances in his kitchen. Yeah.
Sort of fixating on things, eh?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
So
And the losing memory of being married to Bev was a bit of an issue. I was like, yikes. But they talked that through and kind of got that back. And some days he was better than others. If he's overtired, he's worse, right? We drove to the acreage in a snowstorm, and he thought I was Bev's son. But I was fine with that. In fact, I didn't even notice that. It was Bev who picked up on it. So it's just little things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened on February 17th of this year? I'm sure that day will be in your mind for a long time.
Well, his birthday's the 19th. So yeah, that whole area is, yeah. He had been mentioning to Bev a few times in the few days prior that he wanted to go take some groceries to someone. And she thought nothing of it. She said, no, we can't do that. And that night at 11:30 or midnight, whatever it was, when they were going to bed, he said he wanted to go take these groceries. And she said, no, and then she went to bed. And then he normally just follows, apparently. But I guess he went to the bathroom, and then she didn't hear him anymore. So after about 5 minutes, she jumped out of bed and realized he wasn't there, checked for the car, it was gone. So she phoned the RCMP, and they got on it right away. At that point in time, he can't figure out directions, right? When he's driving, he can't tell. That's been that way for a while. So she figured that he could not make it out of Martensville. So she wasn't, she was frantic, but they just needed to search Martensville or the grid roads right around Martensville is what she was thinking. So they did that, and then the RCMP, they couldn't find him right away. And then they searched parked cars in Martensville that looked like his red little cars, and couldn't find him. By 6 a.m. next morning, no sign of him yet. They put out some kind of alert. So we're kind of like, uh-oh. And then we're thinking, okay, he likes to drive. So he's managed to find his way out of Martensville, and he's just driving. And he had a full tank of gas. He had all his, his warm jacket, his mittens, his boots, which is surprisingly to me that he was that prepared. Because as a kid, he wasn't that prepared, but he's obviously learned from being on the acreage. So he was in good shape, so to speak, but he hadn't taken his phone. So there's no way to trace him that way. So he was just out there driving, I figured. And the RCMP kept looking, but they couldn't come up with anything. They put out a missing person report the next morning. And my sister and I figured, okay, we better get the word of this to Alberta, because we figured he'd head west. So I put it on Facebook, and she did what she could through her contacts. It was on the TV at lunch. And then as a family, we kind of said, what are we going to do? So we did some driving around looking for him, wondering if he'd driven off a road somewhere. But once you've driven around rural Saskatchewan a little bit, you realize it's a needle in a haystack. And also, people stopped to ask, help us. So we figured if he'd driven off the road somewhere in Saskatchewan, Alberta, somebody's going to stop and help him, because it's just the nature of the people in all likelihood. So we were still out there kind of deciding that it was time to go home for supper. And Bev phoned and said RCMP had contacted her and they found him. And what had happened was he'd been it was in Tofield, Alberta. And he had gone to a vet clinic asking for help to find his missing wife. And I think what happened was he became lucid, woke up, whatever, realized his wife wasn't there. And they do everything together, everything. Like them, they have all for the last decades. That's just their style. So I think he probably had some deep, like very distraught when his wife wasn't there. So he went in probably the nearest place. I don't know. It happened to be a vet clinic, and the person behind the counter, I think was the vet, was astute enough to realize that his story didn't hang together. So, and was smart enough to say, just wait right here. We will help you find your wife. And it was like the perfect thing to say.
Good for him.
Yeah. So he lucked out on where he landed. So then the vet went into the back room and called the RCMP. And the RCMP showed up, and it wasn't Dad's wife that was missing. It was Dad, right? So the RCMP then handed them over to a person that they have that looks after missing people. The RCMP officers, this is a person who looks after people just like you. And Dad took it as a compliment, and he felt very special. And they took him to the health clinic or hospital, whatever, and they got him all checked over. He said he had 4 doctors looking at him. So he felt very taken care of. And apparently they went over him to make sure there's nothing physically wrong with him. And Bev's son lives in Edmonton, which is not far away. So after work, he came out to get Dad. And then Dad spent the evening or the night at Ryan's, which is great because they're good buddies. And then Ryan and Dad drove Dad's car to Saskatoon the next day. And Ryan's sister came from Calgary and stayed that night as well. And then she was able to drive Ryan home the next day back to Edmonton and her to Calgary. And they were able to celebrate Dad's birthday that night and that kind of thing. So I think Dad and Bev had a lot of phone conversations after he got found. Okay. So I think that calmed everybody down, right? Because he was very distraught about not having contact with Bev. Mm-hmm. So then he was better, and then she was better. And then I think once she was better and relieved, and then I think she was a little bit mad at him. But, because that's once he's safe. And he'd be fine with Ryan, right? Like it was great that Ryan was available and willing to make that trip.
Wow. A few wild days there, right?
It was a tense day, yeah, of not knowing. Yeah. You kind of wonder, you don't want him to go like this. Like you don't want him to freeze. You're worried, you're concerned. You don't want him to freeze. Yes. Like, what if you never find him? What if he goes somewhere and starts a new life and we never hear from him again? I don't know if that would be feasible. And then it's kind of like, okay, he doesn't have he doesn't have a debit card or a credit card because he loses those. So he just had cash. So Bev knew how much cash he had. So that's how much gas he could buy. Okay. And then he was going to be SOL. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't allow you a way to trace him.
No.
Yeah. And that's another trait of the dementia is just losing things.
Yeah, for sure. So, again, we've touched on this a little bit, but looking back, you said that you were sort of relieved. You thought something might happen in the fall, but even other than that conversation of him talking about taking the groceries, was there anything else that, when you guys look back, that say the week or two before this happened, that would have given you any idea?
Bev was completely surprised. Yeah. I didn't have any clues. I wasn't as close. And Bev's there every day, all day. Yeah. And she said there was a complete surprise. And he's never taken off on her before. Okay. In all their years.
The unpredictability, right?
Yeah. So it was a complete surprise. She didn't have any inkling. I thought maybe if you say no to somebody and then leave them alone for a little bit, maybe they say, well, I'm just going to do it. Right?
Yeah, who knows?
And there was this little window because she wasn't right there. Yeah. But that's just my take. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a little bit of confrontation, right? Yeah. Yeah. On the flip side, he had shown no initiative over the summer.
Okay.
Like none. She couldn't get him to fix anything. He didn't even want to walk to the mailbox to get the mail. at the end of the driveway, very lethargic. And once he was safe, I thought, well, he's shown a little bit of initiative. There's not the kind you want, but
for sure, absolutely. Yeah. You've already touched a little bit on the next question I was going to ask you was about the emotions that you as family and he felt. And, I think you've touched a bit on that already. Is there anything else you'd like to add to sort of the emotional impact of this? And I guess since February, what has things looked like?
Yeah. So I think we had the worry and the concern. Bev was distraught, right? Surprise, shock. And from him, like once we talked to him, he was very apologetic, very regretful, thought he went crazy. He'd never do that again. Very like, here's my keys, keep them just in case I go crazy. Like he really doesn't ever want to have that experience again. And I had a head injury about 20 years ago, and I where was I going with that? I think when he was lost and then woke up, kind of, I think it hit him really hard that Bev wasn't there. So I think there's a core emotional distress there. And so he wants to avoid that feeling.
Yeah. Since that time, then, has there been more conversation about his driving cessation, or has he changed his habits?
Actually, he's okay. In terms of his driving, he's actually, when they go somewhere, he always drives, and that is still the case now. Bev keeps a close eye on everything, because at one point she was having to tell him where to turn, right? So like a couple of years ago, she was having to he would not know how to get to places, so she would tell him where to turn. And then for a while, she stopped telling him where to turn. Does he have him figure it out? She figured that would be good for him. But up until while they were doing the move, she was telling him where to turn, right? If he missed a turn, she would bring it to his attention. Where was I going with that? Oh, talking about driving sensation. So she's keeping an eye on his driving skills and his reaction times, and she's pleased with his driving skills, so she's letting him stay driving. And he has said that when the time comes for him to stop driving, that he will stop driving and she will just take over. So it's an easy transition, like it's an easy fix. She just takes over. And maybe if he's having a bad day, she can take over just that day, right? Mm-hmm. But that's their decision on how to handle it. And I think part of that's motivated by the fact that Dad really likes driving. So, and that's him driving and her being the passenger has been the style all along. So there's been discussions, and he's way more compliant about stopping driving than I expected. I expected he would dig his heels in and say, never, but he's like, yep, when the time comes, here's my, and the fact that he will hand over his keys when he gets home. Wow.
That's big for him.
Huge. Yeah. He was, he's always been big into driving. When he taught me to drive, when it was time for me to get my license, most kids probably went around the neighborhood with their parents or around town. We went to a hill. He put a matchbox behind the back tire and said, okay, you got a clutch and a gas, and here's what you do, right? And we went to an icy parking lot, and you skidded. It was the Coke bottle on the hood, which, of course, I didn't get more than 2 feet.
So what did your dad do for a living?
He was a printing pressman.
Oh, okay. So driving wasn't a part of his work per se, right?
Not at all.
Pleasure, eh?
And his dad was a printing pressman, and his grandfather was a printing pressman. Oh, okay. So he's third generation printing.
Oh, wow.
And my uncle worked in printing as well. Yeah. So driving was not part of his job. He just
a pleasure for him, eh?
But him and Bev will go on vacations where they hop in the car and they drive. So
that's a pleasure thing for him.
It's a pleasure thing for him. Yep. And last summer, I was out at his place, and he kicked my tires and said, I just want to take your car with Bev, not me, with Bev, and hit the road, right? And I wouldn't take that as a sign, because that would just be an honest expression of what he'd like to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, I really appreciate you sharing this. It fits so well into our evening of education, talking about a multi-step safety toolkit. And the things that we've talked about already this evening and what we'll talk about after this portion of the evening. And so I just really want to say thank you for sharing a bit of this story. Before we finish, is there anything else? Like if you were, I don't know, if you wanted to give words of wisdom to the folks that are watching or any other thoughts around this, I want you to sort of have the last word here, Susan.
Okay, just random thoughts. When we were looking for him, I thought it would be really handy if gas stations got missing person notices. So when I was in Martinsville, I stopped in at the co-op and said, "Hey, do you guys get missing person notices?" And he said, "No." But then he thought it'd be a good idea too. Now, I'm not sure if your typical 18-year-old kid is going to want to look at a missing person notice, but maybe that would help, right? Might trigger something. If Dad had carried a cell phone, that would have given us an option to track him. So a charged cell phone, a charging cable in the car, not being short on sleep. He had some alcohol a day or two before. I don't know if that would affect it, but now he's sworn off alcohol. If there's any opportunity for alcohol, he's going to have ice cream instead. Just
good choice.
Yeah, he'd probably prefer that anyway, right? Yeah, I guess. I mean, one shiny thing out the window and they're gone, right? So I don't know if there's too much you can do, right?
Other than have a plan in place, right?
Yes, have your contact list of people. So I was helpful on that end, right? Yeah, that's the plan in place and everything you can do to, like hiding the keys. The RCMP guy said that's the one thing he said was hide the keys.
Okay.
And as a taxpayer, I kind of feel it's our duty to hide the keys because we don't want to incur RCMP costs where we don't need to, right? Yeah.
All right. Well, I again really thank you for this, Susan, and greatly appreciate the time that you've taken. Anything else? Sorry, you were going to say something else.
One more thing. After dealing with this and trying to support Bev, supporting Dad, the one thing that I already knew, but it really brings it home again, is the people who are taking care of people with Alzheimer's are just saints. They're just, yeah. Okay.
Well, I guess that does bring me to one final thought too, and it was about, if any advice on, how do we best support your dad and Bev and yourself moving forward as an organization, or as giving you some tips on what do you do after the fact to support the person with dementia that has experienced what he's experienced.
Well, yeah, I think if I were to ask Bev that, she would say, listen to the caregiver because they're there all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think that might be one of her concerns with the medical profession, because she doesn't think she's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And how do I support them? Yeah, I've tried things like, here's my magnetic toys, because he likes working with his hands, right? He's not a reader, but so I've tried different toys or puzzles, whatever, but it doesn't seem to interest him. So I'm not sure how to support him as well, but she's got a pretty good handle on that. But working outside in the yard seems to help him.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, again, thank you so much, Susan, for being here with us and for sharing a bit of your story.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you guys do, because it's a great support group.
Thank you, Susan and Connie. If you just want to take a second and have a quick stretch, I'm going to get the next and final presentation just loaded up here on the screen. So have a quick stretch. I'll do it slow way because I can't get it figured out, guys. Get started in just a second. There we go. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. All right, I would now like to introduce our final speaker, Heather Van Starkenburg. She's the first Link Care Navigator with the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, and so we're really happy to have her tonight too. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks again, Susan, for sharing your powerful story, and Connie Snyder, one of our Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan First Link coordinators, for guiding the conversation. Earlier in the conversation, Susan mentioned GEM. For those of you not familiar with GEM, it stands for Geriatric Evaluation and Management Services. There is a GEM clinic at the Saskatoon City Hospital. Clients see a multidisciplinary team for assessment and treatment. Another tidbit of info to give you some perspective. Susan's dad's drive from Saskatoon to Tofield was about 445 kilometers. That's a 4.5-hour drive. So as mentioned, my name is Heather Van Starkenburg, and I'm a First Link Care Navigator at the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan. This evening, I'm talking about the multi-step safety plan to reduce the risk of wandering, a guide for caregivers. The Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan has created 2 resources for caregivers: a multi-step safety plan to reduce risk of wandering, a checklist, and the multi-step safety plan guide to help caregivers understand the importance of preparing a multi-step safety plan to help the person with dementia live in the community safely. Tonight, our focus will be on the contents in the guide. You should have received these 2 documents attached in an email prior to this event. Multiple strategies are encouraged to reduce the risk of wandering because no one strategy will meet every need. This short guide has excellent information and resources on understanding wandering, reducing the risk of wandering, and how to prepare a multi-step safety plan. The guide was adapted with permission from the Alzheimer Society of British Columbia's Wandering and Dementia, a guide for caregivers. The Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan appreciates being able to adapt Dr. Noelannah Neubauer's Canadian Guidelines for Safe Wandering Community version for us to use in this guide. Dr. Neubauer, Dr. Lily Liu, and Dr. Christine Dom from the University of Waterloo in Alberta were consulted for their expertise in dementia, wandering, and wayfinding. For my portion of the presentation tonight, I will be discussing how to make a multi-step safety plan for the person with dementia who is living at home. If the person with dementia moves to a personal care home or a long-term care home, I would encourage you to discuss wandering and multi-step safety plans as part of his or her personal plan of care. Dr. Neubauer, who spoke earlier this evening, has created a document called Canadian Guidelines for Safe Wandering Care Home version that may be helpful to you. Caregivers of individuals experiencing Alzheimer's disease and other dementias can benefit from safety planning to reduce the risk of wandering when the person is living at home. Multiple safety strategies are encouraged because no one strategy will meet every person's unique needs. It is important to use multiple strategies to help the person living with dementia who's living at home from becoming lost in the community. The Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan has designed a multi-step safety plan template you can use to help you. The plan includes 3 sections: strategies to reduce the risk of wandering, listing community supports and contact information, such as a list of friends and neighbors and relatives, and keeping an ongoing journal or record. First, we will talk about number 1, strategies to reduce the risk of wandering. As part of the plan, the following strategies are suggested to reduce the risk of wandering. Make customized identification. Fill out an identification kit. Register with Medical Alert Safely Home. Let's talk about the first one. making customized identification. One of the strategies you may wish to use is to create customized identification with ideas such as the following. Create a laminated card that can be placed inside the person's wallet or purse with name and phone number. Sew identification labels into clothing. Purchase a generic bracelet or have an existing piece of jewelry engraved. Please note, privacy and safety should be considered when deciding what information should be included on customized identification. Also, a limitation of generic identification jewelry is that they are not connected with an emergency hotline service like Medical Alert Safely Home and may not be recognized by police, paramedic, and fire rescue. Another strategy is to create an identification kit. This kit can help you organize vital information about the person living with dementia. If he or she goes missing, you will have this information on hand to assist police. The ID kit is within the guide you received with an email prior to this event, and we encourage you to complete it. It includes items such as the following and much more: name and personal information, a recent photo, medical information, and what to do if a missing incident occurs, and more. Let's talk about the last point, what to do if a missing incident does occur. First of all, begin searching immediately. Check the common areas, for example, all rooms in the home, outdoor spaces surrounding the home, garage, and shed. If registered with Medical Alert Safely Home, call the emergency hotline, which is available 24 hours, 7 days a week. We will discuss Medical Alert Safely Home on the next slide. Contact the police and tell them that a person with dementia is missing. Do not wait the 24 to 48 hours. You can reach out as soon as they are missing. Tell the police if the person is registered with the Medical Alert Safely Home and give them the identification number. Share the identification kit. If the person may be in a vehicle, share vehicle description with police. If the person may be using public transit, share information about transit routes they have used in the past. If the person's credit cards are gone, please inform the police. Consider notifying credit card companies, as tracking their use may help locate the person. And alert family, friends, and neighbors that the person is missing. Ask them to help with the search. Ensure that someone stays at home in case the person returns. And remain calm when the person is found and provide reassurance. We encourage you to register the person with Medical Alert Safely Home. Record the Medical Alert identification number in the person's identification kit. What is Medical Alert Safely Home? Medical Alert Safely Home is a nationwide, Canada and US, bracelet identification service designed to help identify a person living with dementia who has gone missing. The service also helps to connect the person with their family. It was created through a partnership between Medical Alert Foundation of Canada and the Alzheimer Society of Canada. How Medical Alert Safely Home works. With the Medical Alert Safely Home program, the person with dementia wears a Medical Alert identification bracelet full-time. The bracelet is blue to indicate a person with dementia. The cost to join the program is an annual fee of $60, which is equal to about $5 a month, and includes a complimentary bracelet. There are options available for any clients who have financial challenges. Veterans receiving health benefits through Veterans Affairs Canada may be eligible to receive the Medical Alert Safely Home service for free. To find out more about the program and how to register, visit the website on the slide, www.medicalalert.ca/safelyhome. And for those who may prefer not to wear a bracelet, there are other options for an additional cost. For example, a wristband or a wrist sports band and a dog tag pendant for necklace. Engraved on the inside of the bracelet is the person's identification number, their name, medical information, for example, memory loss or penicillin allergy, and a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week medical alert hotline number. All emergency responders, police, paramedic, fire, search, and rescue can call the hotline to access immediate information on where the person lives, their emergency contacts, and medical information. Emergency responders are trained to instantly identify people with dementia simply by looking at the bracelet and noticing the blue color. Good Samaritans can also call the hotline, and the hotline staff will contact the family directly. It is important to keep all of the person's information up to date. For example, if the person moves, experiences a change in health, resulting in an addition of another medical condition on the bracelet is an example. As caregivers, make sure to keep the MASH information accessible: phone number, ID number, home address, and this can be kept on a recipe card on the fridge or in a purse. Along with registering for medical alert safely home, we would recommend that you check with your police service to register for the Vulnerable Persons Registry. For example, Saskatoon Police Service has a Vulnerable Persons Registry that may be used during situations requiring police interactions. This registry allows police quick access to critical information about a registered vulnerable person, a registrant. Dr. Neubauer spoke about locating devices in her presentation earlier, so I'll just touch on these a bit now. As she mentioned, prior to purchasing, think carefully about the benefits, drawbacks, and safety needs of the locating device. No device or system can guarantee that a person will not get lost or that the person will be found. Keep in mind the person's values and wishes about personal freedom and dignity, independence, and safety. The Alzheimer Society strongly encourages people recently diagnosed with dementia and their family members to have these discussions early as part of planning for the future. There are a number of locating devices on the market. The Alzheimer Society is unable to confidently provide information on the pros and cons of the ever-changing market or endorse any one product. We encourage you to read the Alzheimer Society information sheet about locating devices that we will send you in an email following the presentation. It is important to have a list of names and contact information on your community support people, for example, neighbors, friends, and relatives handy. And so this list is also included in the multi-step safety plan guide. Let family, friends, neighbors, and others in your community know that the person with dementia has a potential to wander. Ask them to stay alert and notify you if you think that person is confused or lost. Also, if possible, ask the person with dementia's permission to share their diagnosis with others before doing so. Keep a journal. Keeping an ongoing journal or record can help provide insights into reasons for the person's wandering behavior. Understanding the person's wandering patterns and triggers can help you put strategies in place. Useful things to record include: was the wandering dangerous? Why do you think the wandering occurred? How long did the behavior last? What seemed to help the person relax after the incident? Look at patterns: time of day, what was the person doing prior to the event? All behavior has meaning. All About Me is a record-keeping tool that can be used to know the person living with dementia better. It is available online, and we will also email you this tool in a follow-up email after the presentation. Let's support the person to live at home as safely as possible. Here's some suggestions. Enable safe wandering. Encourage the person to walk a familiar route and let you know when expected to return. Consider using a door chime or alarm that signals when a door is open and locating devices, which we discussed earlier. Provide visual cues. Leaving a light on in the hallway may help reduce disorientation at night. Putting labels on doors may help the person find their way around the home. Modify the person's environment. Keep objects associated with the outdoors out of the person's view. For example, car keys, jackets, and shoes. If possible, place door locks above eye level or where the person cannot see them. Try to disguise doors by decorating or covering them so they do not look like doors. Participate in meaningful activity. Exercise can help the person use up extra energy, may improve the person's sleep patterns, and may be a coping mechanism. The right balance of activity and rest may reduce exit-seeking behavior and promote better sleep patterns. Engage the person in activities they may enjoy and can feel successful. Involve the person in day-to-day household activities. And finally, maintain community connections with your family, friends, neighbors, Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, and local community center. Families of individuals experiencing Alzheimer's disease and other dementias can benefit from safety planning to reduce the risk of wandering when the person is living at home. Multiple safety strategies are encouraged because no one strategy will meet every person's unique needs. The multi-step safety plan, checklist, and multi-step safety plan guide for caregivers are intended to help families reduce the risk of the person with dementia who is living at home from becoming lost in the community. We hope you found this presentation helpful tonight so that you learn more about wandering, understanding risk, strategies for reducing risk, and preparing a multi-step safety plan.
Thank you so much, Heather, and to all our presenters this evening. If you haven't already done so, please put your questions in the Q&A while I tell you a bit more about the Alzheimer Society. We have moderators who will read, summarize, and present the questions to Dr. Neubauer and Heather shortly. Please keep your questions relevant to tonight's topic. Your question may be summarized or reworded for us to answer as many questions as we can. So I'm just going to go through a few slides before our questions, so you can have some time to think and enter in your questions while I go through a few more slides about the Alzheimer Society. And we're going to talk about Alzheimer Society research program. So the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan funds research in partnership with Alzheimer societies across Canada through the Alzheimer Society Research Program, ASRP. Research funding moves us closer to life-altering treatments, better care, and cures for Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. So since 1989, the ASRP has invested over $64 million in dementia research. In 2020, the Alzheimer Society invested in 2 new areas of focus, encouraging new researchers to explore radical new ways to advance our knowledge of dementia and improving the quality of life for people living with dementia, their families, and caregivers. In addition to the 2 new areas of focus, the ASRP focuses on a variety of funding priorities, including discovery, policy and health system change, evaluation of community programs, and ethical and legal issues. Research funded by the ASRP focuses on identifying potential new drugs for Alzheimer's disease, using neuroimaging techniques to distinguish different forms of dementia, studying how diet and other lifestyle choices may delay the disease, developing technology to enhance quality of life, care, and safety for people affected, improving care delivery in the community and in long-term care settings. Through research, evidence is growing that we can lower the risk of developing dementia through lifestyle changes, including healthy eating, regular physical activity, not smoking, maintaining cardiovascular health, and being mentally active. So the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan funds research in Saskatchewan in partnership with the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation. Our focus is on research into finding treatments, causes, and cures, and improving the quality of life for people living with dementia in the province of Saskatchewan. Presently, we're funding 2 exciting grants in partnership with the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation. So the first one is called Culturally Safe Caregiver Support Groups for Caregivers of Indigenous People Living with Dementia. This project, led by Megan O'Connell, will test whether providing caregivers with access to virtual monthly support group sessions improves their ability to cope with the stresses of caring for a loved one with dementia. And the second one is called Engaging Caregivers of Persons with Dementia in the Virtual Delivery of and Access to Health Information and Services. This project, being led by Dr. Gary Groot and Dr. Carrie Mickelduff, will put into the hands of Indigenous caregivers touchscreen tablets and small wireless routers that serve as a mobile Wi-Fi hotspot. It'll give them ready access to a specially designed curated suite of information and resources designed to help prevent burnout from heavy burden this role places on them. In addition to funding research, the Alzheimer Society plays a key role in connecting people with lived experience of dementia with researchers who are conducting dementia-related research. We love our donors. Currently, 3 out of every $4 comes from donations. These donations come in during events, as sponsorships, gifts left in wills, monthly donations, or as general donations to the Society. You were able to attend the evening of education today at no cost because of the generosity of a donor before you. We invite you to consider supporting our organization with a donation to truly make a difference for people in Saskatchewan who are living with dementia. Donations can be made online or by phone, and you'll receive a donation link in an email following the presentations tonight. With Alzheimer Society resource centers across Saskatchewan, in the 2019-2020 fiscal year, we provided service to over 3,000 clients from 290 different Saskatchewan communities. Our shift to offer virtual and online programming has increased our ability to provide additional programs across the province. If you have questions about dementia or need someone to talk to, call the Dementia Helpline and the numbers on the screen Monday to Friday during regular business hours. A couple of upcoming events to tell you about quickly. We invite you to participate on the IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's. This event helps the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan annually raise awareness about dementia and funds that will support vital programs for people affected by dementia in the province. So to promote safe participation, we are encouraging individuals to register and fundraise online while walking anytime in May from wherever you are. Then each participant can tune into our virtual broadcast on Sunday, May 30th to celebrate your efforts along with others from all across Canada. We have a Next Steps for Families learning series that's coming up. It's being offered virtually province-wide by Zoom on May 31st and June 2nd. So this learning series will offer family members and friends caring for individuals with dementia an overview of the diagnosis and the changes you may experience. You will learn about topics including what is dementia, memory loss, coping strategies, medications, treatments, research, planning for the future, and community resources and support. Let's go now to the questions for our presenters. So these questions will be directed to Dr. Neubauer or Heather Starkenburg.
Okay, well, we have one question for you, Dr. Neubauer. First of all, thanks so much for the excellent presentations. What geographic region is covered by the Rapid Response Working Group, or is it specific to Alberta?
So right now it's actually specific to Ontario, just because the funding is through the Alzheimer Society of Ontario. However, our team did fairly recently apply for a massive amount of money through the National Search and Rescue Secretariat, or the Search and Rescue New Initiatives Fund. So we're supposed to actually find out within the next couple of days if we got that funding. And if we do get that funding, then the intention would be that we'd try to expand this working group and some of the police educations, with Saskatchewan actually being one of the provinces that we would be reaching out to try to provide that. So stay tuned. I'm hoping that we'll get good news in a couple of days, and then our team will start reaching out, because really we want to be able to get representatives based on the provinces once we start expanding.
Thanks so much. This question I think could go to either one of you or maybe both of you. We don't have a lot of questions at this point in time, and we do have a little bit of time. So any suggestions on what to do when the individual has started to feel the need to leave the house anytime that the caregiver leaves? So far, there hasn't been problems or concerns with wandering, but this individual's concerned that it could happen, and if the individual ever got lost, they wouldn't know where to look.
Heather, did you want to respond to that, or you want me to go and then you see if you have anything extra? Okay. So I think obviously behaviors in that end up changing. I would try to explore, even if they're following the person, maybe they might want to exercise a little bit more. I know that exercise sometimes just helping with some of that anxious energy ends up helping. But again, if the behavior is still happening more often than not, my biggest recommendation is just start implementing some strategies, whether it is just using one of those like Bluetooth tiles and just asking him, have a conversation with him, say, hey, are you okay if you get lost? And we're able to see where you are. And if that's not the case, even just having like filling out the ID card and just following that kit that's been now offered through the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, if they have something, then at least it's better than nothing if he does happen to get lost. Feel free to add, Heather, if there's anything else that you might want to bring in.
Yeah, and I guess just if you're comfortable with it, and if the partner is comfortable with it, just letting people in the community know that what's happening, and to bring in some community supports just in case something like that was to happen.
Okay. This next question actually would go back to Karen when you were reading about the research that's happening. Karen, someone mentioned the Culturally Safe Caregivers Group and a second program which provides tables and resources for caregivers. What is the name of the second program, and is it for Indigenous people?
The name of the second program. Okay, so the second program that I was talking about, it was called Engaging Caregivers of Persons with Dementia in the Virtual Delivery of and Access to Health Information and Services. And I do not know, and maybe some of you that are on the call tonight might know more. It does say Indigenous caregivers, so they will be the ones that will be able to have touchscreen tablets and these wireless routers to have different information and resources. So that is also an Indigenous study as well.
The other suggestion I might offer is that the individual who's asked the question, if you want to contact our dementia helpline at 1-877-949-4141, and you can just ask the dementia helpline staff person for the specifics about either of those research programs. We don't have any other questions in the chat pod at this point, or the Q&A, so.
They're just overloaded with all the information that's in their brains. They're trying to digest it.
That's right. We'll wait maybe a couple of minutes here and see if any more questions come in, and then can wrap up. So you can just stare at us for a few minutes if you don't have any questions.
Dr. Neubauer, do you want to maybe talk a bit more about your research while we?
I could talk for days.
Well, how about we have one more question here. Can Dr. Neubauer provide the citation for her study about statistics regarding wandering?
I can even, it's an open access journal that I published it, so I can even share that paper with you, Karen, if you wanted to distribute it. So yeah, it was literally just published on Sunday. So
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Susan mentioned reunification following her dad returning home. Is there any research or suggestions regarding reunification that you're aware of?
I know there's something to keep in mind is to remain as calm as possible and provide a lot of reassurance, and just really to be there for that person once you're reunited, is just to keep that person feeling calm and recouping from the experience.
And if you don't mind me even adding to that, I know that at least what we've seen from talking to people and through the research, everyone thinks that they're at fault. It's my fault I got lost, or even from a care partner, if their loved one gets lost, it's my fault that they went out, but it's no one's fault. It happens. I think it's just, it's trying to just to understand what caused it, and then to be able to move forward.
Someone else has asked, how do you find the resource for those who live in long-term care? So I guess your resource,
Yeah,
Dr. Neubauer.
It's presently available through the Finding Your Way website. So findingyourwayontario.ca. They have all 3 versions on there.
And I can just add that the Finding Your Way Ontario website also does have a document on reunification as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I think, maybe there's one more.
Yeah. Would you be able to suggest activities to prevent the need for wandering for someone that lives in a retirement community?
One idea could be if to engage in meaningful activities, and we have a document at the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan called Meaningful Activities, and you can contact our office for that document, and it's based on the person's interests and challenging them mentally and physically, and possibly even going for walks to use up some of that excess energy with someone going with them. Could be some examples of something that might be helpful.
And the research supports all that. Especially it's me, I'm almost OT, so just doing anything, right? It's in many cases they're just bored. Giving them some meaningful activities is massive.
I just wanted to point out too, there's also on our Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan YouTube channel, there's a recording or a presentation on meaningful activities that we did last year. So you can just Google that.
My mom lives in a seniors apartment building with many suites. Sometimes she is wondering where she is, forgetting she is in her own home. Any suggestions as to how to make her know she is in her own home?
I think maybe including items that are meaningful for her. For example, a favorite comforter, pictures of family from her longer term,
earlier on in their journey, like
Thank
it's
you.
earlier on in their life.
yeah, from earlier on in their life, because the short-term memory is often the first to go. So yeah, so just items that would keep her comfortable, and remind her of earlier times to help her feel more comfortable, and reminders that she is at home.
Dr. Neubauer, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, that's exactly. They're just finding different familiar things.
If I could add a suggestion, even something personal on her door,
Yes.
that would indicate, like if all the suite doors look the same, something that would be personal to her, her name, maybe her picture on it, so that she would know that that suite is hers versus the neighbor's.
Yeah, and I know that hallways are the worst for wayfinding as it is, so it's anything to be able to make it stand out. Even something that's fun even is, I know I've seen some people that they've used like wrapping paper and they've wrapped their door a different funky color and then put the name on so it kind of stands out more.
Any final questions?
Nothing else in the pod.
Okay, I think we'll wrap up the evening then. I'd like to again thank Dr. Noelannah Neubauer and also Heather and Susan and Connie as well for their insightful presentations and stories on reducing the risks of wandering. I also want to thank Connie, Jennifer, Ariana, and Carly for their behind the scenes help with the presentation and the questions. So thank you for that. And everyone on the call, there will be an evaluation sent out to all via email soon, as well as more education resources we mentioned tonight. So we really appreciate you taking a few minutes to complete that evaluation. Your feedback's really important so we can improve on these future events. Our next public evening of education will be on the topic of grief. On September 28th. We'll have more information on that event in the summer months. And thank you again for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.